What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I'm welcoming to the show Matt Wagner and Kelley Jones. Welcome to the show, gang.
Thank you.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having us on.
I'm so excited. As a kid growing up reading Batman, I've followed your works a lot in comics and things like this, and now you are both on this Kickstarter project, the Dracula books, and I want to dig into all of those things. But I always like to start with my guests of just have you always had a love for comics like growing up yourselves? Did you gravitate towards comics or how did you kind of get into the hobby?
Kelly, you want to start?
For me, uh, oddly enough, the first thing I became aware of with comics was Marvel had done these cartoons in the late 60s and they were being rerun. And I think the series was called Marvel 66. And they just would take, the panels and move them around and, they're pretty
Yeah,
primitive.
very minimal budget in those.
But you know what? For me, it worked. And the thing that's the first time I ever saw something like that. But it was my older brother had come home. He was a few years older, and he came home with a stack of comics at the end of a school year. And apparently, the teacher used those as if kids got done with their assignments early, they could read some comics and be quiet. So he gave them to my brother, who didn't really care, and he just left them on the counter. And I picked them up, and that was the beginning of it. Where I really, really liked them. I had no idea who made them. I just liked the characters and the art
Mhm.
and then picked them up when you could. There were no comic book stores, so you'd see them at a grocery store or at a something like that, or at a flea
Drugstore.
yeah, flea
Yeah.
market, stuff like that. So I didn't get them in runs. You just buy a chunk here and a chunk there, and but I always really enjoyed the medium from that point on.
Yeah.
My mom was an English teacher before I was born, and so she was always big on pushing me to read, to read, to read, to read, to read, to read. And to this day, I'm a fast and voracious reader. And I was an only child, so I drew to entertain myself because we didn't have much video entertainment. We had a TV that got four stations and they were black and white. And comics were both drawing and reading all in one thing. And unlike a lot of English teachers of her generation, she didn't mind that I was reading comics so long as I was reading. And in fact, Kelly was talking about sources where you'd find stuff. Back in those days, there was always a rack, a small rack at the point of purchase at the supermarket, where today you have the National Enquirer and that's kind of tabloid magazines. There was always a rack of Classics Illustrated. And she would buy me those. So that was my first exposure to, Robert Louis Stevenson and Shakespeare and Dickens and etc. Um, so I was always in love with comics, and in fact, my parents had a school memories scrapbook, one of those things that has places to paste your photo and to fill in your height and your weight, and all through your school years, a little pocket to stick your special projects. And on the grade school years, on the back of the page, it had a spot that said, "What I want to be when I grow up." And one year I wrote astronaut, and I have to assume that was 1967 when every kid wanted to be an
Yeah,
astronaut.
everyone.
Every other year I wrote comic book writer.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just because I assumed, whoever wrote them must draw them too. I didn't realize it was most often a team effort.
Yeah.
But yep, I was doomed from a very young age.
Yeah.
So, do you have aspirations to knock that one goal off still of being an astronaut, or does that pass you by?
No, I'm too lazy and comfortable at this point.
You're like, I'll stick with a 9 out
I'll
of
stick
10
with air.
comic writer. Okay. So, obviously, Matt, you're talking about then you knew from an early age this was something you wanted to do. Where was it for you, both of you, that you kind of had this switch of like, I want to start to pursue a career in comics?
For me, well, I went to art school because I knew I wanted to get a visual artist of some kind. I didn't imagine that comics were a reality because at that point, and this is the very early '80s. There was still no overnight delivery, or if it was very fresh. So you had to live near New York, which is where the two major publishers were. And everything was done in person. You came into the office in person. You probably took a train from Jersey or even as far down as Philadelphia or Connecticut, and you came in person and picked up your gig from your editor, and then you went home on the train and you did your job and you brought it in and dropped it off in person. So I didn't live near New York, so it just was never a possibility. So I imagined I was going to be a commercial illustrator. Seemed much more feasible. And then I went to art school in Philadelphia, and I met the guys that had this idea to form this independent publishing company, which was Kamiko, my first publisher. And this was in the days when it was the early days of independent comics. You know, there were only a few examples. Dave Sim Cerebus, the Peeny's Elf Quest. Mike Friedrich was doing an anthology called Star Reach, but other than that, there wasn't any. So these small independent publishers started to creep up. So all of a sudden, it seemed like a possibility.
What about then for you, Kelley?
I always like to draw. As Matt said, you had to be in New York then, so I never thought that was going to happen. I didn't really draw. I mean, I did draw some comic book pages per se, but generally they were of locales and creatures and people doing things and stuff, but in black and white. And went to a comic book convention in San Francisco, and I was about 16. And a friend of mine, a little older, who drove, uh, without telling me, brought some of my work because I had no intention of ever. It wasn't in my mind. But he worked at a comic book store
Mm.
and thought I could do that, and always would say, "I think you could do that." Anyway, we go, and I'm there because Jim Stranko and Jack Kirby were going to speak. It was a big, you bring stuff to be signed and whatnot. And conventions were much they were pure comics then. They were
Yeah,
just comics.
and much more intimate too.
Yeah, it was amazing. So at one point, the big guy, one of the big guys then, uh, was Marshall Rogers, and we all really liked his stuff. Had just come out, his Batman run with Steve Englehart, and we were standing in line, and he was going through a few portfolios before we could get our book signed. And I'm not saying he was like, "Ugh," but he was rough on these guys. He was telling the truth. No,
Yeah.
you got to work here. You got to do this. He was very, very honest. And I had said to my friend, because he had been saying to me before, you should have brought some stuff. He knowing he had mine. And I said, man, I am
Cheeky
glad.
bastard.
Yeah, I'm glad I did not bring anything because that's pretty. Well, my friend, we go up there and he says, my buddy is I think pretty good. What do you think? And I about died.
You're cringing. Yeah.
Oh man. And he goes through, he goes like one, two, three. He says, "Do you have some time? Do you want to come around and sit here for a minute?" And he puts a hold on the line and says, and he starts to tell me what he likes, what I need to work on. He does a little sketch of a figure to help me learn proportion. He says as much that I live out here. I probably don't know anything. But he thought if I kept at it, I might one day, he thought, do a pretty good Batman.
Damn, I've never heard this story. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So it went from that moment of it's a hobby and I don't know what I'll do as a career. No, it was nothing to do with art. Um, to I will give this a shot. Maybe I should try
Mm.
doing this. And lo and behold, about 81, this was 79, about 81 early, yeah, 81 or so, Marvel started. I'd sent some stuff in, didn't hear, but then they said, "Do you want to try? Here's some pinups and a few pages here and there to try me out as an inker." Um, and about a year after that, they hired me full time. So Matt's right. That's when they first started doing FedEx, so you
I
could
was gonna say
deliver.
because FedEx changed everything for
It
us
did.
outliers.
It did, and so I really then was taught the practical how to do it of comics from Marvel had a very good editorial staff then on teaching you how to do it
Mm.
and mentally how to do this. And one would be once I started penciling, is when they really kicked in. And they would say, you got to do a page a day and just pick one panel, make it great. Just get the other ones done, right? And if you can do that, you'll have 22 great panels. And how many comics do you know that have 22 great panels?
Oh, wow.
In classic painting, that's called vignetting.
Yes, yes.
Most famously seen in the work of Rembrandt. If you look at Rembrandt's stuff, there's always like this side of the face is highly, highly rendered, and the rest not so much.
Yeah,
You
not
know?
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they would teach you that. They would keep it was really a good system of thinking, the way the Marvel editors were, because everything was deadline. And from that moment on, I had to catch up. Everyone I know, like Matt, went to an art school. There were none out in California, not where I was. And no one even said comic books or comic. I would have never said comic book writer. I never had the wherewithal to think like that.
Yeah, but
So,
the art school I went to frowned on comic books.
Yeah,
like
they
the only
all
comics
do.
they approved of were New Yorker cartoons.
Yes, that was okay. But we're the only
But
people
dude,
who made
you
our.
mentioned art school there. The best art school I ever had, and I'm sure it was the same for you, was seeing your work in print.
Yeah,
Because when you're just doing stuff for yourself, you can go, looks okay.
yeah,
Like that hand's kind of messed up, but it looks good enough. You see 10,000 copies of that hand, you
yeah.
realize I should have made that hand better.
Yes, yes, and those things stick at you. I remember.
Yeah, you sure
Uh,
do.
um, one of Marvel editors said, "Do you have?" Because no one had them. You had to go find someone with, or a little company or a office supply place that had a Xerox machine, and said, "If you can't Xerox your stuff first and then look at it, because it will flatten it out, and then you'll
Yep.
see the mistake." So I found a little place, and I'd go Xerox. I have still boxes of Xeroxes from those days, and they were right. As soon as it graded out,
Yep.
you could see what you just said.
You
You would
notice the imperfections.
Oh
Yep.
man,
Yep.
everywhere. It was like all of a sudden I'm
Yep.
going, oh my God, I got to redo
Gee,
all
these
this.
eyes are off kilter.
Oh man, one's bigger than the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff that I still hold on to. I don't have to Xerox anymore, but in natural light, if I turn off all the regular lights in natural light, especially when it's getting later in the day, all my stuff will kind of flatten naturally just on the board. Pencils will flatten, and you can see where, okay, I got to tweak that. I mean, I still do that. I still go back and look.
Plus, at this stage, we both have a reproduction eye. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? We both can look
yeah,
at it and go, okay, that's not going to matter, or
yeah,
that needs fixed.
yeah. And lastly, they would say, uh, don't worry about mistakes. They can be fixed, and something can come out of a mistake. And they would give me examples of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of, meaning they didn't want you to be so hypercritical you didn't turn in anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys now they do seriously 2 or 3 issues, and they need a breather. Matt and I, we'd have been fired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have to get this done. The comics are useless if they can't have you in the seat. So,
And that's been a big strength in regards to this Dracula project, because we're
yeah,
attempting to do one graphic novel per year, and if both of us were precious or snowflakey about stuff,
yeah.
that wouldn't be possible. But we both are,
Well,
hit the ground running and
I
keep
wouldn't
going.
know how to call Matt and say, I'm just not in the mood today. I'm not
Yeah.
feeling it today.
Right.
I don't know what he would say, but it wouldn't be, hey, I understand. It wouldn't be that. It'd be get off your ass and do it.
I remember way back in the day when Grendel was first a monthly. It was kind of in the middle of its run at Kamiko, and I won't rat anybody out, but there was an artist who was well behind, and my editor, Diana Schutz, who is kind of legendary in the field as an editor, she called him to. This is when you called people instead of emailing. She called him and she said, What's the problem?" He goes, "Oh, it's Halloween's next week," and she went, "What? You know, what are you, 12?"
It's funny. I met Diana years ago, like 80, 81. She was working for Bud Plants, writing out stuff.
Comics and comics. She was doing Telegraph Wire.
Yes. And she was wonderful. We all really admired her work.
Mm.
what she was doing. So when she went on to eventually be an editor, that was natural. That just seemed like she was the first one to really make it from the comics and comics area.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to this day, I mean, she still keeps in contact. I know a lot of those old guys, and she's always they're always going back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that was a we used to couldn't wait to see what she was going to write about what was going on.
So
Well, that's how I met her. She interviewed me for the Telegraph Wire,
Yeah.
and later I married her sister. So there you go.
Now you're on deadline.
it
Yeah.
now comes full circle.
Yeah.
And speaking of full circle, Kelly, you mentioned something that that when you were early into your process and you were getting your work looked at, it was mentioned that you'd probably make a pretty good Batman. You make a pretty good Batman. Just saying.
Thank you. I think it's because even then I worked in a lot of lighting. I did. I was more influenced by film at that point, even though I loved comics.
Mm,
Um, there was no one teaching how to do things. That's why he drew a little figure and says, "Here's how you do anatomy." And I'll always love Rogers for this. He said, "Don't worry about being absolutely perfect on things." And he says, "Here's the thing." He says, "When I'm drawing Batman." Or when I'm drawing Bruce, this is how I do him. He says, but when I'm drawing him as Batman, I add him one head. He's not
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
taller.
It's
And
like he swells. The
yeah,
costume makes
he's
him
bigger.
swell,
And he
or
said,
swole, I guess, in contemporary
right.
usage.
And he said he got yelled at by editors for that, saying it's not consistent. It's not consistent. The cool thing is we all picked up on that without knowing he had done that trick, that Batman just seemed more
More
amazing.
imposing. Yeah. Yep.
And so he wasn't, and he was never a guy who said, I'm right, they were wrong, ha ha. He didn't do that. He
mm,
just said that's something that worked. And he says, and you can get that through to readers because he says you kind of have that style. If you can get it through to readers, you'll do fine.
mm,
It was a very and I always stuck with that, not to rage at editors or say they don't know. You work with them and you try to get through what you can. And eventually, if you can keep doing that, you'll have a style. I mean, he said all these things. And at 16, that was actually more important than an art class to me
mm,
because it was like, oh, philosophy now, the how you think about this. I always said if I taught an art class, it would be boring because the first year would be no drawing. It would just be looking and thinking and doing that, or the first semester. It's so much how you have your head on about this. Um, it doesn't matter how long you work in the day as long as you get how much you're supposed to get done.
mhm.
If you get it done early, get away from it and recharge your battery.
Yep. Take a little walk. Yep.
Yeah, just get away. All the things that he said or Marvel would say, I that never went away.
Yeah.
My favorite Marvel one was probably pay your damn taxes too, because
That,
everything
that's
was
that's an important one that
yeah, pay your damn
comic artists need
taxes.
to learn. Yeah.
I can remember every time it came around tax season, they would say, "Have you done them?" Because they had artists who wouldn't do it,
Hmm.
and then they got into trouble, and the IRS would call them.
Which screws up production.
Oh man, does it! So I went and got an accountant. Then I remember doing that, going, "Oh, it's mathing me."
Mhm.
So I just took it all and would do that. And where I knew I had made it wasn't a job per se; it was the accountant calling me and saying, "You have a tax problem." And then I knew, okay, he at that point, then they tell you other things to do. But I would have never thought to do those kind of things. And uh it's something probably comics should do is if the companies has put out a sheet for all these new guys coming in or whatever, hey, because that stuff is why I'm getting Dracula out on time with not a problem.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's the absolute reason.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of your lessons that you both have learned throughout your time have really crept into this Dracula series that you both are on. So I want to hop into that because the Kickstarter for book 3 is live right now, and at the time of this video will drop, and we'll have links in the description of this video and or podcast wherever you're listening. But how did this? So we're on book 3. You have 2 previous ones come out. How did this teamship, friendship come about to work as a team? How did this kind of come about then to say this is a project that you both wanted to pursue?
Kelly and I had known each other for decades. We had met each other a few times at cons, but we kind of really got to know each other when we both worked on Seasons of Mist, the kind of most popular of the Sandman story arcs, Neil Gaiman's Sandman. So we were both along. Let me point out, I drew one chapter. Kelley drew all the rest. Uh, um, we were both along on the various PR junkets for that. And there's us and Neil, and everybody's all the little goth girls are oohing and awing over Neil. So it left us to like get to know each other, and we immediately kind of clicked, and we realized we both love horror. We have a similar sense of humor. Everything just got along well. And so then for forever, we kept saying to each other, we really got to do something someday. We got to work together, and we both knew we wanted that to be a big something, not a little one-off, not and as we get further and further into our career, the thought of doing something for, a publisher seemed less attractive. So Kel had hit me up with that same echoing comment, we really got to do something together someday, in a comment on Facebook. And I contacted him. I said, dude, are you serious? Because I've been thinking about this idea for like over a decade now, and I think it fits us both perfectly. But it's a big commitment. We're going to do at least 4 graphic novels. I have outlines in my mind for 4. And so that's going to be 5-6 years, something like that. And I want us to do them as Kickstarters because this is a whole new independent model. And Cal, you tell your side of that.
Well, like I said, when he said that, Matt called, and I was he really hit me at the right time. Yes, I always had wanted to work with Matt. We had skirted around it, and I loved his sensibilities. Um, and when he did, I thought it would be Batman or something like that.
Which surely made sense.
Yeah, I did. I didn't. I mean, I knew he did his own thing, so um, I figured it was something like that. And I was coming off. I had just been through some uh, particularly frustrating moments in my own career, whereas the stuff you still run into that thing with companies where this is great, but they take mediocre. Here's where you go, you do it, and they go for mediocre. And it was incredibly frustrating because about a month after that decision made and went into production, they would get a hold of me and say, "Yeah, we should have went with what you said." And that happened like 4 or 5 times. And I knew then I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
want
got to
any.
rankle. Yeah.
Oh, it did. It
Mhm.
it did. Every suggestion I made uh was that had happened to. Even down to pacing. Where it ended, I said should be the middle, and then we see this, and it was all. And they would then later say, "Yeah, we should have done that."
Mhm.
And they would say it in a way that I knew they would not be convinced the next time I'd give a suggestion. So you knew.
They don't learn
So
from the mistakes.
no, they weren't, and these are people who should have known better.
Mhm.
So he caught me right at that time, and I said, "Well, like what?" And then he said Dracula, and I'm glad I was on the phone because I'm going, well, Dracula, we adaptation. That's what I was thinking inside of a two-dimensional static way of thinking. And I should have known better because within 5 minutes I said, I sign me up. I know this is going to be 4 or 5 years. I've got it. I'm doing this because the ideas were so powerful in just this brief little thing. And Matt hadn't worked it all out yet. He was just saying in this one, there's this place he goes to learn. So he go, blah, 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 blah. I go, yeah, I've read the book. I remember that. And nothing was done with it. So he did that to me within that 5 minutes about 10 times. It seemed like, yeah, why not? And I thought, if I'm interested in a 5-minute conversation and I know this stuff inside out and backwards, readers will eat this alive. And that is exactly what has happened.
Mhm.
All of those
So,
ideas,
Greg, sorry, go.
no, it's all of those ideas were so powerful on a 5-minute call that they were able to make it to physical copy and still, if not be more so, even more powerful because you can see it and read it. Um, it,
So let
it
me explain those ideas a little bit, Greg, for your
Yeah.
viewers and listeners who don't know what this project is. My big idea on Dracula was, as Kel said, Dracula's been done to death. That the original book's been adapted so many times, and each one claims this is the most faithful adaptation
yeah,
ever, and they never are.
yeah.
So my idea was, okay, let's not adapt it. Let's stick religiously close to the canon of the original text,
Mhm.
but let's take all the little hints and details because Dracula is approached very obliquely in the book. In fact, once the action moves from the castle in Transylvania to the streets of Victorian London, he's off stage for pretty much the entire rest of the book. But there's all these little gorgeous hints and detail that are very tantalizing. And I said, let's take all those, let's expand upon them, let's show you his history, let's show all the stories that are in the shadow of the novel and not adapt the novel itself again. So you will not see Jonathan Harker go to the castle. You will not see how the novel unfolds in a very traditional sense. Um, the one instance Kelley was talking about there is in our first volume, which is called Book One, The Impaler. Uh, there's two instances in the novel where Professor Van Helsing mentions that when he was alive, Dracula attended something called the Scholomance. And this is an actual Eastern European legend about a seminary for the dark arts high up in the mountains that's hosted by Satan himself. And it's a tenure of 7 years, and he takes 10 scholars for 7 years at a time. And at the end of each tenure, he keeps one of them. And I was just like, holy shit, how has nobody ever done anything with this? Because it's such a deep well for story ideas, but it also explains why Dracula seems so much more powerful than the few other vampires we see in the book, which tend to hit more. First of all, they're all female, and they tend to be in the Carmilla mode, where their main power is they can prey and kind of be hypnotic, and they can turn into a mist and pass through places they shouldn't be able to pass through. But in the novel, Dracula can command the weather. He can command animals. He can turn into an animal. Well, we find out this is all because he's a trained necromancer. He's a sorcerer in addition to being a vampire. My God, that's a huge that's a huge story waiting to be told.
Yeah.
Similarly, book two we called The Brides because in the book the three, they're never called the brides in the book, but these three vampiric women in the castle make this very kind of indelible appearance that everybody remembers, and they're only on screen for like 3 pages. So I was like, we got to tell their story. Like each one of these women, we have to find out who they are, why he wanted them, how he claimed them. Again, the point is there's all these stories that are right there waiting to be told, and we're doing that. We're telling those stories.
And Matt had found this all within the very, very first beginning of the novel. He finds the Scholomance, and you see the three brides appear, like he says, very briefly. And when he was telling me that, and he was going in obviously into more detail about how he wanted to do this, though it hadn't been fleshed out. I was like, how did I know this novel? I've read it a few times, and I guess I just skipped over those things because that is fascinating. Um,
Well, you
and
just accepted it and didn't question
you
it.
didn't, because you were going to stay on the main focus of the
The
character,
story itself, yep.
who then disappears, like he says, from the book, right?
Which
And
leads us to book three, the one we're
right,
currently doing, which is
yeah,
called The Count. This is the one that's in the active Kickstarter right now. So again, once he gets to London, and everybody has probably heard of Carfax, the estate that he buys in London to store his 50 crates of precious Transylvanian soil that he needs to replenish his vampiric might every night. If anybody has seen the very recent film, the Last Voyage of the Demeter, that's about the ship that brings the doomed ship, let me point out, that brings his coffins to America. Um, and then he's kind of off stage, but he's there for a while, and it's like, what's he doing? Well, we show you what he's doing, and it's an interesting journey to go on with him because, for one thing, he's in a completely alien environment. He is all of a sudden in the middle of one of the grandest metropolises on the face of the earth at that point, and as opposed to this isolated castle in the Carpathian Mountains where he'd spent the last 400 years. So that's a big change for him. And he has to explore this new environment and figure out how to exploit it. And by exploiting it, I don't mean he just goes on this blood orgy, because he's a tactician. He was a military, and he spent centuries as a vampire. And vampires have to be careful because there are things that would destroy them. So there's a lot of practicality. How does he get around? How does he do all sorts of things? He makes several comments in the book that the true god of the West is commerce. And so he has to learn how to deal with money and commerce, and how this empire operates. So it's this one's been a blast, and I keep saying in many ways this is the one we were aiming for from the beginning. You know,
Yeah.
this is the one that happens in conjunction with the original novel.
When you first, you sound like you both have read the novel multiple times. Where what
Oh hell yes.
did it click with you right off the bat that those were missing pieces, or when did it kind of open your eyes to say like they mentioned this and we don't really get to explore this much?
No, no. Again, I had been brewing on this for about a decade.
Okay.
You know, I wanted to do something with Dracula, but again, like we both said, it seemed like, just really why?
Yeah.
It's really well trodden material. What new is there to be said? And just the longer I brewed on it, it was just like, well, yeah, there's that. Like for instance, here's the third book is called The Count. Why is he the Count? Who made him a count? When he was alive, he was what's known as a voivode, which is a Romanian term meaning warlord or prince, a war prince.
Yeah, a war prince. Yeah.
Well, who gave him the title of count? That would take a higher regal power to anoint him that. How did he get that title? At the end of book two, we find out. So that's just one of the many practical things that occurred to me. Who made him a count? And it's not really you don't think of count being an Eastern European term, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And what's interesting as he moves along, there's a lot of savagery, a lot of nasty stuff he does in the first two. But it does seem to it seems worse in the third one because he's in this elegant world now.
yeah.
He's in this
Mm.
this very high status, very, very wealthy world, and he's still doing these things. So now it does look more psychotic, more or more malicious.
Yeah. Yep.
That's at least how it, and it wasn't something I thought of when I was going to draw it. It was something that happened when I would review the work. At the end of the day, I go, these aren't just peasant girls or whatever. These are fine women, or even if it's just a street women. Now it's murder. In
Mm-hmm.
our world,
Mm-hmm.
it would be murder. In his world, he didn't have to. He didn't give a damn who knew what he did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now it's a murder, and he has to deal with that. It's those little things that come up, that really make it, well, it as you know, when you're doing as many volumes as we are, it becomes an epic. Each book stands alone, but they all interconnect.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself has made this absolutely a blast to work on, because it has Matt set what the world would be, set the boundaries, and what was going to be said from start to finish in each one, and start to finish for the whole thing. So it feels like I'm on something that is telling that one story, not some open-ended thing, but this one story. Where it goes from there, that's up to him. But
Well, Greg, you were asking there how many times we've read the book. Multiple times.
oh yeah,
And one of the things about the book is it's an early and considered one of the better examples of what's known as an epistolary style. If anybody has never read the book, it's told in the form of there's no omniscient narrator. It's told all in the form of private letters and journals and news articles and stuff like that. Well, as a result, it's extremely specific. Every day of every month is noted. So I was working with four different annotated versions of the novel when I was specifically writing this one. Um, one of which had a calendar in the back that noted everything that happens on every day, including this calendar even had the sunrise and sunset times and the phases of the moon. I mean, it's very specific. So I had to make all the events fit into this specific, already established course of events. And I had to make it so that all the Dracula scholars out there and the Dracula nuts would it would pass the smell test for them, but it also had to be an interesting and engaging story for people who have never read the book.
Mhm.
I had to go into it thinking, there's going to be I would say at least 50%, maybe more, of our audience that have never read the book and probably never will. We still have to engage them. So that was a real challenge, and I think we're pulling it off.
well,
Well,
it's a great story for someone who hasn't read it. It would engage him anyway.
yeah.
And
Yep.
then what Matt has done is, like I said, there's that uh, uh, the full characterization of Dracula, which is interesting, but it's also a pretty bloody story, and it never stops being that. and not just in what his taking of blood, but what he does. I mean, guy never. He's not a guy who's like going ha 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 ha. He's like, I got to do these things. Get out of the way. If it's not out of the
Hmm.
way, I'll remove it. So he
Yeah,
doesn't.
never questions himself. Yeah.
No, he never sees himself as evil. He sees
No.
Yeah,
himself.
the other challenge was to not romanticize him. Because, of
No,
course,
he's
a lot of
not.
the movies do that. The Francis Ford Coppola version, it has a lot of good stuff about it, but it has this central story that's a romance between him and Mina. That's not there in the book at all. There's nothing romantic about him in the book. He doesn't have any tender feelings towards the two main female characters, Lucy and Mina. He preys upon them for his own purposes, and that's it. And so we had to keep him being a monster, and yet an engaging monster, a charming monster. And I mean, I created and have written Grendel for over 40 years, so I have some experience with this. But these sort of characters are things that people really love. I mean, I point to Hannibal Lecter, I point to Tony Soprano, Walter White from Breaking Bad. These monsters that I mean, with Hannibal Lecter, I mean, you in real life, you'd never want him to get out of that cage,
Yeah.
But when you're watching the movie, you're like, when's he gonna get out? When's he gonna wreak his vengeance on these
Eat that guy.
motherfuckers?
Eat that guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. At the end, when he calls Clarice and says, "I'm having an old friend for dinner," you're like, "Yeah."
Yeah. Kill that guy. Yeah.
Well, but you're right. There's, I noticed that right off at the beginning of book one, without giving anything away, he has a relationship with someone that instantly he goes, okay, I've got to do what I got to do to get you out of the way.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll remember you
not
fondly and
Yeah.
like your memory, but I got to do this because this
Yeah,
is
Yeah,
not-
the
Kelley
path
Kelley
I'm
said he
taking.
was really stricken when he read the first
not
script.
giving anything away. That is one of the few times I've read and gasped out loud that I got to that. I was completely I was really digging what was going on. I liked that whole thing. Matt did a nice thing because the dialogue, they were bouncing off one another. It was fascinating. And then bang, he does this, and it so shocked me. I went, "Wow." And I felt really bad. And
Mhm.
you know, never did I say, call Matt, no, don't do this. No, it was like, okay, if that's doing it to me,
Yeah, yeah.
if that's doing it to me. And then I went, man, what balls Matt has to do that.
And then
Because
similarly in book two, with the brides, I had to make sure that this isn't a contemporary man-woman relationship. There's no equity here, right? It's not. He doesn't view any of these women as his equal. He doesn't view anybody as his equal. They are his possessions, and he would never think other of them. He might be fond of them, but they are there for his use and his pleasure and his purposes. That's it.
and consequently, Matt keeps them in their time because that's exactly what those women want from him.
Yeah. Yep.
You be the voivode. You better do these things. Anything less than that, they don't respect him. Even as vampires, they hold him to this standard, uh, and that's fascinating. Because there's none of our sensibilities. It is
Hmm.
the the unbiased way of telling these stories is far more interesting. I don't want to read what we think. I know what we think. I want to know what they think. I want to know how they live. I want to know their world. And that creates something even beyond the supernatural, or it's helped support the supernatural even better. Because Matt did create or present the world as it was without any, and let that speak to us rather than some finger wagging or some let me teach you something.
Yeah,
It
I mentioned there the Last Voyage, the Demeter. When I was first seeing the trailers for that, and I realized there was a female character, I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
Because ships never had females on them.
No,
Period. Just
it's
never
bad
happened.
luck. It was bad
And
luck.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, well, unless Dracula brings one along for a snack.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'll take that. Works. That
Yes.
works for me.
Yeah. Well, that's a comic book idea.
Yeah.
That's why it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. One of the things you mentioned too was you both have been talking about these books stand alone, right? You don't have to have read the novels.
No.
Now what these books have done is I can't wait to pick up the novel and read the novel. I
Yeah.
want to read the novel and see where the intersection and be able to go, oh, this is why they go this way. This is why they did. This is what they mentioned in those because reading book one, book two, they stand alone, but they do connect to build up to like I want to now see how do we get to the count? How do we get to this moment? So I think you obviously you both have been in the game for so long, you have understood how to do these things of okay, we wanted to stand alone, but we still want to be able to be something that, like you said, your hardcore Dracula people go, well, he wouldn't do this right now if the moon was on this phase. And like, so you want to set that up. So I think that is a testament to your abilities as creators to craft stories that stand alone, but then still engage me that I want to now go read the source material that you pull from.
Well, that's
Yeah,
all.
one of the specifics you were just mentioning there that a lot of people might be surprised to learn because it has become so ubiquitous in vampire lore at this point is the sun. In the novel, sunlight does not destroy Dracula. He can walk around in the daylight just fine. He's just not as powerful. At night is when he has the full range of his vampiric powers, you know. But again, I don't know how well people remember the Francis Ford Coppola version, but it's one of the things that that version gets right. If you'll remember the scene where Gary Oldman as Dracula first meets Winona Ryder as Mina, it's on the streets of London in broad daylight. And he's got a hat on and he's wearing tinted glasses, but he's not bursting into flames. That actually came from the very first unauthorized adaptation of the novel Nosferatu, which was kind of taking the vampire thing and melding it with Germanic legends of night creatures like ogres and trolls would be, turn either burst into nothing or be turned to stone by the sun. So it was kind of taking the novel and making it more of a fairy tale.
Yeah. I want to respect your time, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this for you both. Like, I real quick want to look into the process because, like, there of how you kind of tag team this book together because there are some pages that when I turn to of Kelley, your artwork, that I go, holy cow! Like you mentioned, the third book is like even more intense. I'm like, y'all, the first book's called The Impaler.
Yeah.
And there's some scenes in there that are like, whoa. And like, so like, how much of that Matt freedom is it like, I want something like, do you write of just like, I know Kelley's just going to go, like, how much notes do you give to set it up for Kelley to say, this is the art for you? And then
My
Kelley,
my scripts tend to be pretty brief in their descriptions,
okay.
mainly because I'm an artist myself. So I pride myself when I know exactly how little I can get away with giving the artist and what I can expect of them. I don't want to describe everything in these long Alan Moore style scripts.
Yeah.
I feel like if I wanted that kind of control, I should draw it too.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned there, I'm continually writing scenes that I'm just like, Kelley's gonna kill it on this. This is gonna be awesome. And then the pencils come back, and it's better than I imagined it being. So it's been an absolute joy,
Well,
and just my God, just as we are so in sync on everything.
yes, that's what I was going to say was that. And when Matt said you're not going to see him, you're not going to see Dracula actually become in the first book a vampire till the very end. It's his journey to becoming that.
Mm-hmm.
How did this happen? So when he would give me something like the very beginning, when he described, all he said was early on, it's a 2-page spread, and Dracula is walking through a field or a forest of his impaled victims. And that was it. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm not going to show him doing vampire stuff, I better do a pretty thorough job of showing the impalements because that's what the book is called.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go look and see, well, how did they do this?
And that is how they did it, right
And
up the
that is
pooper.
how they did it. And I just went,
or if you're a woman, sometimes up the vagina.
oh, it was horrific.
A horrific way to die.
Yeah.
Horrific. And the fact that that was the case, that he wasn't going to show that we didn't get to the vampire stuff till the very, very end. And it really didn't meet, it wasn't what the book was about then. You had to show why he was so feared. You had to show that he wasn't like made evil by being a vampire. He already was.
Yeah, that was the whole point. Was we had to make him recognizable as Dracula.
Yeah.
The vampire stuff is just icing on the cake. You know what I mean? He's already that character. He's already bloodthirsty even before he is actively consuming blood.
He's not a sob story that you like. There's a redemption arc here. He's your Walter White, like you said. He's your Tony Soprano.
I wouldn't be interested in that. I'm interested in this, and as to it being crowdfunded, that's the good thing. I never thought twice of drawing the impalements or anything in there because it's just Matt that has to either go yes or no or ooh or ah or whatever he's going to react.
It's ooh and ah.
Yeah. So at that point, that's I think a lot of the strength of this is it really is yes, we Matt and I started earlier, uh, but it's that freedom you have when you're high school age, drawing whatever you want, not worried about what someone's going to say. But now it's after 40 years of us doing it. So
Well, and from the very beginning, I said to him, Kel, we both came up at the same time. We
yeah,
both are inspired by the same kind of stuff. Let's recapture that.
yeah.
I said, imagine how you felt the first time you saw a heavy metal magazine
Oh yeah.
when you were,
Oh
what were
yeah.
we, probably 15,
Yeah,
16,
I
maybe?
it was a revelation. It
And you
was.
know, it was always on the top shelf of the magazine rack, so not in the comic book spinner. And you kind of like looked around and very hesitantly took it down. And inside were these just unfettered adult comics, and
Yeah.
I had never seen comics that were aimed specifically at adults before, you know.
It was so
And
taboo. It was
yeah,
so
so
taboo.
taboo. And it's
Yeah.
like that's what we're after, man.
Yeah.
Well,
We want to strike those same chords.
Yeah.
you did because I'm reading. I was reading book two last night, and I'm on the couch. I'm like, is my wife?
Yeah.
So I slightly turned the iPad.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I see now I'm like, honey, look at this. What do you think? And in actuality, she's a civilian, and the first time I've seen her be like into this medium was Math Scripts.
Mm.
Before I even got to it, I said, "You got to read this. This is really in. This is why I'm going to do this, and I'm dumping all the other things." And she is a voracious reader, as Matt is, and
Mm.
has a degree in that, in English lit and journalism, and um, she was deeply impressed. Hey, this guy's good. I remember that. This is good. This is interesting. So then, uh, uh, when it got to the thing with the brides, she's the one who brought it up. She goes, "Man, I really like these women are of their time. That is fascinating.
Mm.
I don't want to hear some feminist thing. I want to see what they thought a strong woman was and what that meant." And that was interesting because, Matt didn't just do a great supernatural thing. He did go back to that time. I think The Brides is a remarkable piece because it advances everything. It doesn't slow down at all. It actually really is a pacing wise, just on a technical level, it's brilliant.
Well, and it's everything for me is story and character, story and
Wow,
character,
is it
story and
ever?
character, you know.
Is it ever?
Yeah.
And I've known him forever, and I've read his stuff, but this is a master class on how to do it. I mean, just on what Matt's doing. It is if you're a writer, this is how you do it.
Yeah. Well, Matt, Kelley, thank you both just for taking the time. Is there anything about the project, about the Kickstarter right now, that we haven't mentioned that you just want to touch on real quick?
Sure, there's a couple of things. You can still get books 1 and 2. The Kickstarter is the only place to get the hardcover editions.
Yeah.
Our Kickstarters run in October. That's Dracula season. And the way it runs then is that the previous book makes its way into the backers' hands in September. So you get the book, the previous book that you've backed, and then the next one starts. But if you're just fresh and haven't seen this or been exposed to it at all, you can still get books 1 and 2 via the current campaign. Or if you're not really a Kickstarter supporter, we have a deal with Dark Horse Comics where they then release a trade paperback version about a month after the backers get their hardcovers. So that's via regular retail outlets, online or your LCS. You can get these trade paperback versions. Now, also on the Kickstarter are some extras. We have merch. We have some T-shirts. We also have some original art, which Kelley doesn't really sell his original art. So when his stuff's on the market, it's very rare and very sought after and gets snatched up very quick. And for this one, what we're offering is a really cool collaboration between the two of us. We're doing 10 original 8.5 by 11 pieces, which is the size of the book itself. That's a little aside. The books are European album size, not standard American comic size. But 10 original pieces that are drawn by Kelley and then color painted by me. So it's an actual collaboration between the two of us. I will point out that those are pretty high priced. They're a premium reward tier. There's only one left. So if you're at all interested in getting a piece of Dracula art by Kelley and me, there's one available yet. If you can't afford those, we are then taking all 10 of those and making a portfolio out of them
Mhm.
of plates that you can also get during this campaign. And the campaign ends on October 30th, All Saints Day, Halloween Eve. Um, so come
No,
check us
and
out, everybody.
the other thing is uh, they're not printed U.S. standard version. They're European album version.
I said that earlier.
Yeah, and so when you see that, these hardcovers become more collectible. That's the thing I like. I'm a collector myself, and my friends who run stores go, you cannot find these things other than through the Kickstarter. But the collectability is there right out of the gate, and uh, that is, I mean, young Kelley would have loved that. That something, right out of the gate became that collectible.
Oh, and one thing else I forgot to mention, we offer three with every one of the Kickstarters, every one of the volumes, we offer three different versions. A version with Kelley's main cover art, a version with my variant cover art, and then a limited signed and numbered edition as well.
Yeah.
So you can really get into the collector.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot
Oh, I
to
know a lot of people doing that,
a
and
Yeah.
lot a
and
lot to enjoy.
yeah, and that's not something from us shilling. That's just something that happened,
Yeah.
which made me pretty happy because I did think when we started it would be based on Matt and I our reputations, but now it's taken a life of its own of the books themselves, and
Mhm.
that's pretty gratifying. That's probably
It
the
sure
most
is.
gratifying.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that because like you both have you have a knack for this because you've been in the game of comics, but like you have it for the collectors, to have the shelf stuff that you want, the rare things, but you also if you're like if you're listening to this, you're like this just sounds interesting and I can't go the Kickstarter route. You're like, okay, pick up the trade paperback and
Yeah,
then,
yeah, yeah.
just you're on a delayed reading schedule a little bit and that's okay. Like and I
Or
think
if you're even more on a budget, digital versions. We have
Yeah.
digital versions of everything too.
Yeah.
Those are quite affordable.
yeah. And I think that's great because you're then hitting whatever demographic you are at of being a
Yep.
fan of comics or a fan of, Dracula and stuff. You want to just get these stories out into the hands and you provide it in multiple ways for people. I think that's
Like any
smart.
retail model would try to do.
Right. So, well, thank you both just for taking some time. Where can people follow along with you both, kind of stay up to date with what you're working on, what you're doing,
Kel?
Kelley?
Uh, Facebook, X, and Instagram, you'll find me there, and uh, I'll just post what we're up to and show what's allowed, and sneak a few things that probably aren't. So there you go.
Yeah, during this whole month, we're posting lots of little peeks here and there. So and a lot of these such interviews. So if you check out both of us, you can go find other interviews. We were just on Last Podcast on the Left, very popular podcast the other day. I'm not on Insta. I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and my website is mattwagnercomics.art, where there's an online store to buy all sorts of stuff from
Yeah.
my private vault.
Nice. Well, gang, all the links that they just mentioned, as well as the links to the Kickstarter, are going to be in the description of this video. If you're listening via Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find the links in the description there as well. Matt, Kelley, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about comics and thank you for all your awesome Batman covers that I got to have as a kid. Like that's my fandom, so I love it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks for having
Yeah.
us on, man.
And
Nice
with that
time
being
again.
said, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.